وافتح لي شأني كله ولا تكلني إلى نفسي ولا إلى أحد من خلقك طرفة عين. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من الهم والحزن، وأعوذ بك من العجز والكسل، وأعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل، وأعوذ بك من غلبة الدين وقهر الرجال. اللهم نسألك العافية في الدنيا والآخرة، اللهم نسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في ديني ودنياي وأهلي ومالي. اللهم استر عوراتي وآمن روعاتي، اللهم احفظني من بين يدي وخلفي وعن يميني وعن شمالي ومن فوقي، وأعوذ بعظمتك واحتال من تحتي. اللهم تخلقني وتهديني وتطعمني وتسقيني وتتميتني وتتقيني وتعمل كل شيء قدير. أمسينا على فطرة الإسلام وعلى كلمة الإخلاص وعلى دين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم وعلى ملة أبينا إبراهيم حنيفا مسلما وما كان من المشركين. اللهم بك أمسينا بك من أصبحنا وبك نحيا بك نموت وعليك نتوكل وإليك النشور. أمسينا وأمسى الملك لله والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم نسألك خير هذه الليلة وفتحها ونصرها ونورها وبركتها وهداها. اللهم نسألك خير هذه الليلة وخير ما فيها وخير ما قبلها وخير ما بعدها، وأعوذ بك من شر هذه الليلة وشر ما فيها وشر ما قبلها وشر ما بعدها. اللهم ما أمسى بنا من نعمة أو لأحد من خلقك فمنك وحدك لا شريك لك، فلك الحمد ولك الشكر على ذلك. وبعد. Well, alhamdulillah, another beautiful month of Ramadan is upon us. And the first thing we want to talk about is the change. In this great month, people transform. And that's what we need. We need to transform. Every single one of us knows exactly how and where we need to change. Everybody, one of us has a goal. And this is the month to attain these goals. This is the month that the likelihood for someone's supplications to be answered is multiplied by over 1,000 times. There are times that Allah Ta'ala gives you like a turbo boost. And He gives at certain times what He doesn't give in other times. So, Monday is not like Friday. Friday Allah gives more. His Allah is greater on a Friday than on a Monday. So, likewise, the last third of the night is not like 9 a.m. Allah will give in the last third of the night what He doesn't give at 9 a.m. So this is not just a month of fasting, it's really a month of transformation. And it's also a great way to evaluate ourselves because shayateen are locked. You know how shayateen are locked. So you see ice running around chasing people. Well, malaika come down in troops and numbers you cannot imagine. On the last night of Sha'ban, the day of Sha'ban, right before Maghrib of the last night. And at that last hour, they snatch all these jinns of the earth. They snatch them all and they trap them. They trap them in different places. They trap them inside of animals. They trap them inside of bottles. They trap them in places, the ways you think is going to be like a comic book story or a fantasy movie. They trap these little devils. But unlike ice chasing people around, you can't avoid angels. You're not winning this battle. They have power over you. And they will trap these devils in ways and in places that get unlocked upon the last night of Ramadan and the morning of Eid. So, if a person finds himself leaning consistently to one sin, one type of sin, that's from your ego, from your nafs. And you have to know that Ramadan comes to control our nafs. If we're going to live a good life, you have to have your nafs under control like this. And you have to be able to put your nafs under your foot. Your ego, your desires, your emotions. A person who cannot regulate their emotions, that is a person who's going to live a miserable life. Emotion is a wonderful thing. But if you can't control your emotions, and you can't regulate your passions, and your anger, and your desire, and your hunger, and your appetite, and your envy, if you cannot control these things, that you're living in a home where the gas is leaking, the electricity is live wires hanging everywhere, the stove, everyone can touch the stove however they want, the water pipes are leaking however they want, people use the water and leave it on. What kind of home is this? It's a home that's on the way to disaster. We all agree. Well, the desires and passions and ego of the human being and nafs that Allah says in Surah Al-Shams, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. That nafs, that ego, is what we're talking about. That is the electricity, the fire, the gas, and the water of your home. Now, you can't live without it, but if you have it, you have to strictly regulate it. You have to strictly regulate it, because these things are the sources of life and the sources of destruction. That's why Allah says He inspired the human being with its good and its evil. Every one of these things that we just listed, it's the source and it's the joy and it's the regeneration of life. The passion we have, men for women and women for men, that's the joy of life. That's also how life continues. That's how we regenerate life. Life regenerates and even becomes worth living because of this passion. And people will go to the greatest lengths to fulfill this passion. This is why when someone gets married, everyone's so happy. Because this person's about to be that. He's about to enter upon the happiest thing that he's going to have in his life. The best thing you're going to have in your life. Even in Sayyidina Isa ibn Maryam, one of his famous sayings is he said, how can you blame a man, how can you blame a woman for leaving her mother and father to be with her husband? Or a man for leaving his mother and father to be with his wife? Don't you see that Allah created Adam and Eve? That's the default setting. So he just went to the default setting. He went to the state of nature. But this passion has to be controlled. If it's not controlled, you have such a destruction of society that it will cease to exist. Your population will just drop. You think it's going to be good because but your population will drop. And Allah Ta'ala tells us all passions, they start from one place. And this is where Iblis, he saw that he can control the human being. What did he say? He said, when I looked at the human being, and you know the jinn, they're different than us. A jinn could be the height of this building, he could be 10 times this building, and he could shrink himself to be like Ant-Man. So he entered into the nose of Adam when he saw a hole here. And Adam was still made of clay, he entered into the hole. And he investigated, and he checked the whole body, saw that he went through the entire throat, stomach, intestinal system, and came out of the rear. And he realized from this study, I can control him. Because he has a void, and at least he's a scholar. He knows the creation of Allah. He knows that nature always, whatever Allah creates that's empty, we're going to want to fill it. He said, this creature has the desire to fill these emptiness. He's going to want to fill it. And I'm going to control him through that. That's why Allah tells us every single nation has observed fasting. Because if you can control it, not Iblis, then you can win. But if Iblis controls your number one desire, which is your stomach, he's going to control all the other ones. In a country, whoever controls the currency controls the whole country. Whoever controls the money controls the whole country. That's why in Europe, the wars that were fought between the Europeans, the same people were given the loans to both sides. So who's actually in control? So the one who controls the money and the stomach, it's like the money in relation to a nation. So Allah Ta'ala's tarbiyah of us, and all the prophets, and all the awliya of Allah Ta'ala, and all the tariqas, and every single murabbi that's worth anything, the number one thing that they promote is to control your stomach. If you are an addict to food, and you don't even think about it, you know some people, they live their whole life, they don't even think about it. You eat, you're hungry, you eat. No, but they don't think twice that this is something maybe I should think about, I should control. What you eat, it influences how you behave. In the same way that it influences how you appear. Nobody can disagree that what you eat affects how you appear. And when you see some people who are really physically fit, it's not by accident. Anybody past their age of 30 who's physically fit is not by accident. It's by intentional control of his stomach. And anybody who's totally out of shape, same thing. This great month should really trigger for us a transformation. And that's why Allah Ta'ala said this month, it's a gift. You think, how's it a gift if I'm hungry all day and tired at night? It's a gift because through these efforts, Allah gives people what they ask for. That's how simple it is. So you should view this month as a month to discipline the soul, but also you discipline your soul, but also you will transform and you will achieve and gain a lot of what you're seeking, what you're asking. That is the wisdom of this sacred month. But there are rules, just like everything else. You want to go through this, you got to go through the rules. Yeah? So the levels of worship, the first level is the fasting of the common man. In Islam, you have three categories of people. In everything, you got three categories of people. You have the commoner, the seeker, and the elite. The one who, he's just on the sideline. He's just barely putting in any effort. He's fulfilling the obligations. That's it. And this person is good. He avoids what Allah forbade him, and he does what Allah told him. He doesn't think twice about it. Now, I'm here to tell you, don't be like this. Don't be like this. Because you don't do this in anything else. When you get dressed, you don't say, oh, whatever covers my body, that's it. When you make money, you don't say, oh, it's an apartment and a can of beans and some meat once a week. Nobody does that. Everyone shoots for hire. So don't let yourself be a commoner in Iman, a commoner in Islam. Don't let yourself be that. But even if you do attain that, you deserve a handshake and you go to Jannah, inshallah. Because Allah's merciful, but don't let yourself be a commoner. The easiest people for Iblis to pick off are the common folk. So the commoner, he just looks at the rules of fasting and he observes them and that's it. As soon as Maghrib comes in, he eats. As soon as Fajr comes, he stops eating. But he doesn't think of anything besides these two rules, that's it. Now then there is the seeker, the fasting of the seeker. Every single one of us can be one of these. The fasting of the seeker now starts to look at the nawafil. What can I do beyond not eating and eating at certain times? And that is where we're going to start looking at the Sunnah and the nawafil of this month of Ramadan. So his focus is now on the ibadah. He makes dua at iftar, he makes dua in suhoor, he praises tahajjud, he prays tarawih, he reads the Quran all day, he decreases his level, even possibly putting his phone totally away for periods at a time in this month. Because it's our biggest distraction. We all suffer from this distraction. So that's called the fasting of the seeker. What's his focus on? His focus is on the acts of worship. Then there is the fasting of the arrivals. In the spiritual path, there are three categories. There are commoners, they're not even on the path. There are seekers, we call them murids. And then there are arrivers, al-wasilun. The wasil is somebody who has been capable of now focusing on the one who's worshipped, not the act of worship. So he does the acts of worship. That's a big caveat we have to say. He does all of them, but inside the act, he's thinking about the one who's worshipped and not the act. That's the difference between two people. A man is praying and he's just learning how to pray, so he's focusing on standing properly, bowing properly, what to say in ruku', what to say when he stands up. So what's his focal point? The act of worship. But after a few years of that, now he must graduate naturally. By the way, if you just do this, you will naturally graduate to now thinking about the one who's worshipped. And that's the worship of the arrivals, al-wasilun. It's as natural as somebody driving from east to west. And naturally you have to pass Ohio before you reach Colorado. And you have to hit Colorado before you reach San Francisco. So naturally, every single one of us, at one point, will just be a common person. That all we think about is our desires, and that Allah puts some limits, so we patiently observe the limits, and as soon as the limit's gone, back to focus on our desires. Every single one of us, at some point, we're like this. Nobody's better than anyone else. Some people travel faster or further than others, and some people got a head start more than others. But all of us have to travel the spiritual path. Otherwise, what are we doing here? We're not here in the message to get the bare bones and basics, and that's it. No. So if the commoner thinks his focal point is on himself, and Allah Ta'ala does put obstacles, so he has at least the courtesy to respect his Creator's obstacles, and he views them as obstacles from enjoying himself. The seeker has realized that that's not the right way to be. We have to focus on Allah deserves to be worshipped more. And if I want to transform, I need to focus on these acts of worship. So he starts focusing on the actions. And he piles them up, and he has lists and all these things. And he checks off how much he recited, etc., etc. But eventually he will become an arriver. And the wasilun, they arrive, their thought, their body is in the actions. But their heart and their mind is on the one being worshipped. Those are the levels of our worship. Now we ask the question, how does a person remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because that's our main goal here in this sacred month, is to worship Allah. How do we remember Allah? Now, a lot of people, they don't know how to do it. And just like many people go to the gym, they sign up for the gym, they don't know how to use the machines. They walk on the treadmill, they look at others, they're a bit embarrassed. They don't want to really use the machine and have only a few weights on it. And if they do, they don't really know what they're doing. And if you do that in the gym, you just wasted your membership. But you need trainers. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to teach you how to do dhikr and how to remember Allah. The easiest and the best and the most effective and the simplest way to purify your heart is to listen to the Quran on your headphones or just without your headphones. But better on the headphones, even though they're not really healthy, so you can't put the volume up high. They have a rule. 60 and 60. I think that's the rule. Don't put the volume past 60 and don't have it on for 60 minutes in a row. Well, although this is a great invention, many shuyukh love this invention because you listen to the Quran and it blocks out all other sounds, so it's hyper-focused. But we have to have a caveat that it's also bad for your ears. So you have to keep in mind to lower the volume. And you have to take it off if you put it on in the first place, because you don't have to. But to listen to the Quran is a great gift. Imagine way back in the day, if you didn't know how to read the Quran, you could not even listen to it until you went to the masjid and someone was reciting it. Think about that. We don't realize the blessing that we have. This month, it should be on all the time, and you should listen to it, and it is the greatest source of fixing your orbit and returning your orbit. See, there was an experiment once which a guy put 100 grandfather clocks in the same room. 100. Grandfather clock are the clocks that have pendulums like this. Some of them big, some of them small. And then he monitored the pendulum, so when he looked the first time, all of them were off. They were all off. He came back after a very short period of time and found all of them were in sync. And they were in sync with the biggest one. The biggest one didn't change. They all became in sync with that one. Allah tells us in the Quran, the sun and the moon are in orbit. They're in perfect orbit with their Creator. So we also, human beings, need to become in orbit with our Creator. If you listen to music, your vibration is going to be off. You're going to vibrate off, of course. But if you listen to the Quran regularly all the time, you're going to be in course. That's the first dhikrullah that is easy. The second one, a little bit more effort, recitation of the Quran. If you know how to recite, that's even better. And which recitation is better, out loud or silent? Ulama told us that if you're unable to pay attention, recite out loud. But if you are focused and paying attention, recite silently. The next one, as we all know, is dhikr and dua. Al-Junayd, Muhammad ibn al-Junayd al-Salik, he carried the same misbah his entire life. And he was never seen without it. A misbah for the remembrance of Allah non-stop. What's the easiest dhikr of Allah? It's Allah itself. Allah, Allah, Allah. The dhikr for the beginner is to say La ilaha illallah. The dhikr for the nervous person is to do salah on the Prophet. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And we all know the times of dua should be spent at least 3-4 minutes minimum before iftar. Sometimes before iftar, we're thinking about the iftar, rushing it. Now, there's something I want to tell you about the iftar. Don't just go by the clock. You have to give it a buffer. These calculations that you see on your phone, this is not the word, this is not absolute fact. It's a calculation, it's an estimation. They did the best they could, but it's not an absolute fact. So therefore, knowing that, we are bound, obligated upon every Muslim to wait a few minutes, because we know they're pretty much trying to get it right. And they are close, but we cannot state that it's a fact and that Maghrib is in. So you have to wait a little bit. Okay, you have to wait 3-4 minutes. So, well, aren't you making dua anyway? You're making dua anyway. So what does it hurt you? And that is the best time, as Allah said, my slave, he has 2 happinesses. The day he meets his Lord and the moment he breaks his fast. Well, hold on, breaking the fast, it's a great time because you get to eat, but it's not, I'm not that happy to eat and drink. I'm happy, but not that happy. All of us can think at times we were happier than breaking your fast. I've never seen any person in his life who said, what's the happiest moment of your life? He said, the day I broke my fast. So clearly then Allah is not wrong either. Which happiness is he talking about? He's talking about another happiness. He's talking about a happiness because that moment is the source of all happiness. Because the prayers therein will be answered. So when our lived experience says one thing and Allah says another thing, so how do we combine the two? We combine the two because what Allah is saying is that all of your happiness is due for your prayers being answered. It's due for the blessings that you got. And on the Yawm al-Qiyamah you'll see that. You'll see, oh subhanAllah, this great thing happened. It's a result of me breaking the dua I made when I broke my fast on this day or on that day. So it's because of the dua. What's a fourth way to remember Allah that is really extremely important? Most people, it's easy to get distracted. And you do dhikr and dua in the beginning, but afterwards
your focus becomes on the worship and not the one being worshipped. And so therefore Allah gave us another great and wonderful form of ibadah, which we call munajat. Munajah is to speak to Allah Ta'ala. It's not necessarily only dua, it could be dua, but it's more intimate than dua. Munajah is to speak to Allah with what's on your mind. And to set for yourself a period of time in which you do this. You're going to be advanced and you're going to be closer to Allah than you ever imagined. Because when you're doing dhikr and dua, it's very, very easy to start saying to yourself, all right, how many times did I say it? What did I say? What am I feeling when I said it? Khalas, the ibadah has been robbed of you. You've been robbed. You're not thinking about Allah anymore. This is why it regularly happens that people have spiritual high, then they go down. What happened for this to occur? What happened is you started thinking about how much we're doing it. What is the melody of my recitation? How do I feel about it? And now you're not thinking about Allah anymore. But when you speak to Allah, you're always thinking about Allah. You can't speak to somebody and get distracted. That's why munajah, that's the worship of Moses. That's the worship of Muhammad in the cave. That's the worship of every waliullah in the depth of his worship. His mind, that's where it goes. And I highly recommend everybody to learn this. There's nothing to learn. And the shuyukh always tell us, you speak to Allah with whatever comes in your mind. And don't think that, oh, someone else may be upset about that. You're talking to your Creator. Prophet Zakaria himself, he had a private munajah with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Quran tells us it was private because it would have upset his disciples. Prophet Zakaria was nearly 100 years old. And his complaint to Allah Ta'ala is that none of my disciples turned out to be worthy of leadership. That's his complaint to Allah. The Bani Israel were difficult. So he had to keep his prayer and his complaint silent. Munajah is the worship of Jacob, Yaqub, when he lost Yusuf. Didn't he used to say, إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. I complain my sadness and my grief to Allah. That Yaqub, with his great rank of prophethood, used to say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh my Lord, I have no complaint to your decree, but Yusuf was such a beautiful boy. I wish I would see him grow up. I wish I could have led him growing up. He complained his sadness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And complained, ashku, complained about his sons. How they hurt me, how they took Yusuf away. So do you think his sons want to hear that? So tad'u Allah wa tukallimu Allah bima yakhturu ala balik. On anything that comes across your mind and your heart. Even if it's something that is about somebody else. We're not meant to keep these things flustered in until you explode, until you get depressed. What happens if you're cooking something and you keep the lid on? It's going to get wet. The heat's going to boil up. It's going to form into droplets. The food's going to be wet. Okay? So you have to release it. That's why they put a little hole on top of the cap of the pot. Has to release some of that steam. If you don't release the steam, you're going to be depressed. So release it to the Creator. Yeah. Who has to fast here? There are 3 preconditions. This is a word you should know called shurut al-wujub. The preconditions of obligation. There are 3 things that have to exist and 3 things that cannot exist. The three things that have to exist is that you have to be a Muslim, sane, and mature. Mature doesn't mean you behave properly. Mature means your body has grown up into puberty. A man, he's had a wet dream. Once a boy has a wet dream, he's a man. Once a woman has menstruation, she's a woman. And if they have a sickness, then it's the age of 15 in the Hanafi school and 18 in the Maliki school. If they're sick, they don't get haid or they don't get wet dream. So he's sane. Sane doesn't mean, sane just means you can tell your right from your left. That if you ask them the time and the date and they can have a conversation, then you're sane. Now, what are the three things you cannot have? You should be free from travel, bleeding. Bleeding means menstruation or postpartum bleeding, not bleeding from a cut. Talking about the bleeding that is outside of a woman's control. Haid and nifas. Bleeding that looks like haid, but is actually caused by an external factor, is not haid. We don't count it as haid. And freedom from sickness. Because if you're sick, then of course we know you don't have to fast. The obligation of fasting is not upon you. You're going to make it up later. Right? The difference is that if you're missing the first three, you're not sane and you're not mature, you don't have to fast and you don't have to make up the fast. But if the other three come, then you have to make it up. Yeah. And we'll cover that in a second. Now, the pillars of fasting are very simple. And they're unseen. That's why fasting is a special worship, because nobody knows you're doing it. Unlike Salah, Zakah, Hajj, we all know you're doing it, correct? Zakah,
Zakah. Yeah. The Zakah collector knows you gave Zakah. The Zakah recipient knows you gave Zakah. Your family may know you gave Zakah. Right? Hajj, of course, we can tell you're making Hajj. We can tell you're praying, but nobody knows you're fasting. Pillars are only two. Intention and abstinence.
you have to make the intention of fasting, and you have to abstain from what breaks the fast. So what are the nature of the intention? It is in the heart. It must be before Fajr. And it counts for the entire month. You don't have to make the intention on day 1, intention on day 2, intention on day 3. No. One intention in your mind. You say to yourself, I intend to fast the entire month of Ramadan. That means hypothetically, if you were to sleep through the whole night and you never woke up, except after the sun has risen, then you say to yourself, oh, I never intended the fast. Do I fast or not? No, you fast. Because you intended it in the first of the month. With one exception. Anytime that a person had to break their fast for a different reason, sickness, travel, haid, then they would renew their fast, their intention, when they're going to fast again. Okay? Make sure you write down any of your questions. We'll take all the cues at the end. Next one, abstinence. The abstinence are the muftirat are very simple. Fluid reaching the throat, solid reaching the stomach, and the emission of major or minor sexual fluid intentionally. Okay? Those are the three. That's how simple it is. Fluid shall never reach your throat. That means it could be in your mouth. Yeah, it could be in your mouth and you split it out. But once it reaches your throat, you're liable. You broke your fast. You broke your fast. Solids, however, have to reach your stomach. And they could reach your stomach at any time, in any way. If it was to reach your stomach, hypothetically, through a syringe into your stomach, you broke your fast. If you, in any way, shape, and form, if it reaches your stomach, you've broken your fast. Any energizing syringe that a person would take breaks his fast. If hypothetically they would invent a patch that gives you energy, that breaks your fast. Not only this, is that you also have to avoid vapor. So this type of bukhur that we put on, we all know that a vapor can enter into your nose and can form a droplet and enter your throat, with exceptions of what is impossible to avoid. Shower, cooking is impossible to avoid. They're necessities of life, and we're not taking into account on those smokes that come up. So the muftirat, to put it very simple, is fluid from reaching the throat, solid from reaching the stomach, and the emission of major or minor sexual fluid. Which is that if a person intentionally engaged in pleasure in such a manner that the minor sexual fluid came out of him, his fast is broken, and he owes qada. But if the major one comes out of him, which cannot happen by accident, ever, in that case, he owes qada and kafara. We'll cover those expiations later. But those are the three things that break your fast. Okay. Of course, you can also break your fast by lifting the intention. Okay. So it is a sunnah to break the fast as soon as Maghrib comes in with certainty. Not with just a phone, no, with certainty. So if I don't have water or dates, how do I fulfill this sunnah? With my intention. Okay. I intend to break my fast now. That's it. You've broken your fast, even if you didn't put food or water in your system. There are 3 sunan of Ramadan. 3 sunan. Suhoor, Taraweeh, I'tikaf. Suhoor is a great sunnah to be done, and it's to eat in the last portion of the night up to the amount of time it would take you to recite 60 verses of Quran in an average speed. So how long would that be? It should be 10 minutes. Surah Yasin, it's 83 verses, correct? So it's more than 60. Surah Yasin doesn't take anyone 10 minutes to read, right? So whatever the clock says for Fajr, you should really stop 10 minutes before what it says. If you eat afterwards, because you need to, then it's halal, but it's not the sunnah. If you want to observe the prophetic way, it is to stop 10 minutes. This is called imsak. 10 minutes before Fajr. Imsak is a word that means I'm not eating, but I'm not fasting. That's what it means. There's 2 imsaks. We're going to talk about the 2 imsaks. Many people, when they study fiqh, they don't study imsak. There's 2 imsak. There's imsak, withholding. Imsak means withholding. What is the Urdu for imsak? Withholding. Do you have this word in Urdu? Imsak? You don't have it? Yeah. Imsak is 10 minutes before Fajr. That's a sunnah. Eating beyond that, you've broken the sunnah. You're not on the sunnah anymore. Why? The Prophet didn't like someone to accidentally eat past Fajr. You open yourself up to accidents like this. Okay? A suhoor should never ever be skipped. Anybody who skips suhoor, you offend the Prophet ﷺ. Because the Prophet ﷺ said many times, do suhoor, even if a cup of water and a date. Okay. There's a lot of people who have these different hacks, and they take these different powders that have electrolytes and the creatine and all these different hacks that you can look into yourself. But the least, dates, water, cucumbers, bread, olive oil, beans, whatever you want to have. But you should have some. The next is Taraweeh, and masajid should always, as a sunnah, recommended, highly recommended to observe 20 rakahs or 36 rakahs. 20 rakahs is the action of the Sahaba, 36 rakahs, but the same length, but divided more. Some people say, wow, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz established 36 rakahs. No, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was actually making things easier because he made the rakah shorter. So you can go in and out more often. What is the least amount of rakahs to have observed Taraweeh? 2 rakahs. 2 rakahs. What is better, to do it in my home or to do it in the masjid? If you're a person who's capable of focusing, it's better to do it at home. If you're a person who needs the energy of the jama'ah, which I think we all are, you do it in the masjid. Do I do it out loud or silently? It's better to do it out loud, but if you do silently, it's acceptable too. Do I have to do a khatam? No, you don't have to do a khatam. The Sahaba never did that actually. That came later. The idea of reciting from Baqarah to Nas, it didn't exist in the first generation. They came up with that idea later. Okay. So that is Taraweeh. At the very least, you do Taraweeh in your home. If you're sick, if you can't come out. The third sunnah is i'tikaf. And in the Shafi'i school, you can do as much i'tikaf as you want. 1 day, half a day, quarter of a day, just a night. And it is to bind yourself to the boundaries of the masjid, except for a need. Obviously, you'd have to go to the bathroom. Or you can go get a cup of, if there's selling a cup of coffee in the lobby, you can go there. But the person doing i'tikaf actually binds himself to the walls of where people pray. And the sunnah was to set up a tent in the mosque for your privacy. Okay? Especially for the sisters. Set up a tent. They can zip up the whole tent and she can be in her privacy and she's in i'tikaf. Brother can do the same thing. I don't know if the masjid will allow that policy, but that's how they used to do it in the past. You set up your own little tent in the masjid so you can be in privacy. Okay? And i'tikaf has special rules. Lahu is almost sinful. Lahu is entertainment. That means, can you imagine someone doing i'tikaf, but he's catching up on highlights and scores? Can you imagine someone watching YouTube videos and Netflix? You can watch classes, talks, Quran, dhikr, that you can watch. But you should not even engage in discussions on the sacred law. Sharia, it's not the time. Ramadan is not the time. Most of the shuyukh, they stop teaching. And the only time they teach is because they realized in Ramadan is the only time we got an audience. In some masajid, even in Egypt itself, one of the greats, he used to teach fiqh in Ramadan. He says the only time that people come. So he took advantage of it. But in general, classes stop in Ramadan. Okay. So i'tikaf is a great act of ibadah in the last 10 nights. Now what do you do in i'tikaf? Let's say, either in i'tikaf or not. What is the worship of i'tikaf? All good deeds. And a lot of people don't realize this. They think it's only recitation of Quran. Not at all. The last 10 nights, anything that's called a good deed should be done in the last 10 nights. So if you're not doing i'tikaf, you can visit the sick. You can have an invitation of food, suhoor, into your house. Anything that we call good deeds can be done in the last 10 nights. Because the Prophet ahya al-layl, he gave it life. In the last 10 nights of Ramadan for us is a time to be awake. And as we move into the winter time, you're going to see now that there are longer and longer nights. And so we can have more and more opportunity to do different things. So that could mean giving a talk to youth, visiting a sick person, mending between two people arguing. All these things that are good deeds you can do in i'tikaf. Visiting another masjid, visiting the community there. We move now to what is discouraged in the month of Ramadan, and it's 2 things. Allahu, entertainment in this month is discouraged. Entertainment outside of this month, a little bit of it is halal, a lot of it is makruh. In Ramadan, a little bit is discouraged, and a lot of it is offensive. Extremely offensive to the month, the sanctity of the month. The second discouragement is excess in eating, because the whole month is about the stomach, the control of the stomach. And therefore, excesses in eating is actually discouraged, believe it or not. And many people may feel that I'm inviting people to my house and I want them to eat good food. They do get rewarded for that. But it's upon the guests to be reasonable in how much he eats. But to say, I'm going to invite these people who are fasting and I want to give them a good dinner, you get rewarded for that, of course. Let's now talk about the valid excuses. And they are only a few in number. Hayd and nifas. If a woman gets hayd, menstruation, or nifas, of course we all know she doesn't fast and she makes up the fast. And if she has hayd, she's obligated to get up for suhoor and check if it continues. She cannot assume. She can't say, I always have 5-6 days, so this is day 1, I'll sleep through Fajr. No, she has to actually wake up at suhoor. Actually, she has to wake up all the time, even to see if she's going to pray Fajr. So that's hayd. Sickness. In terms of the fasts, there are 3 kinds of fasts. There are fard, sunnah, and nafil. The fard and sunnah, the sickness therein is that in which reasonably you cannot continue the fast. You don't have to wait until you cannot continue life, as some people imagine. They think that it's a sickness, I can only break my fast if I'm going to die. That's not the case at all. If you can't continue the day, the pain is too much, that's sufficient. Anything that would naturally require medicine, not encouragement, but a doctor, you have to take something, then you're allowed to break your fast. For fard and sunnah. For nafil fasts, it's much less than that. You can break your fast just by being busy. You can break your fast by being a little sick. You can break your fast because you got a guest, because you became a guest. Sometimes you can inadvertently find yourself invited in someone's house and they offer you food and it would be rude to tell them you're fasting. So for the nafilah, there's a little bit more of a leeway than for the fard and sunnah. The obligatory fasts, we all know, is the fast of Ramadan and any makeup days, and the fast of breaking an oath, 3 days. Okay? The sunnah fast is 1, Yom Arafah. The prohibited days of fasting are 2. Who knows what they are? The 2 Eids. It's actually haram to fast. And the rest gives us 330, what is it? 333? 332 days are nafilah. So Monday, Thursday, nafilah. Ashura, nafilah. Nafilah is much less than sunnah in terms of the sanctity of the day. So that's sickness. Now the next one is travel, and this is really important that you know that travel counts. You are a traveler when you intend to travel and leave the boundaries of your city before Fajr. This is important if you need to take a flight. Let's say your flight is at 9 a.m. and you're traveling a really long distance, let's say 12-hour flight. Okay, so in that case, 9 a.m., you'd be in the airport, let's say 7 a.m. But Fajr comes in way earlier than that. Fajr comes in at way earlier. You have to fast. Now, if you don't want to fast, say, no, I don't want to fast a 12-hour flight, then go to the airport before Fajr and camp out in the airport before Fajr. Once you exit your city North Brunswick or South Brunswick or Edison, intending to go to, let's say, London, then at that point, you need to go to the airport and hunker down in Newark Airport before Fajr comes in, then you are a traveler. But for me to think, and many people make this mistake, is that any kind of travel allows me to break my fast. So that I'm in the middle of the day, and I take a flight, as soon as I get on the plane, I can break my fast because now I'm a traveler. That's not the case. Whether you fast or not is determined by the moment that Fajr comes in. If you are within your city limits, with no intention to travel, or even with the intention of travel, if you are within your city limits and Fajr comes in, you have to observe that day. And you are to break your fast in accordance with what it looks like outside, where the location you're at. So that means if you're traveling east, your day shrinks. You can have a short day. And you look out the window. The moment you see Maghrib, you break your fast. But if you travel west, you're running away from the sun. And therefore, your day is going to be longer. But nonetheless, you wait until Maghrib is outside your window. And that's how you break your fast. Now, traveling is better to fast while traveling than to break your fast. It's better. Although you are allowed to break your fast. There's a fourth reason why a person can break his fast. And that is responsibility for others. He's responsible for others. For example, a bus driver who drives a bus all day and is fasting. If he starts to feel that he can't control the bus, he becomes obligated to break his fast. And a pilot, same thing. A nursing mother, same thing. A pregnant mother, same thing. A surgeon, same thing. The moment he feels that the fast is going to cause me to harm this person, at that moment it becomes an obligation to break his fast. Now he can't say, every single time I do a 5-hour surgery, on the 3rd hour I get dizzy, so I just won't even break my fast. I won't even fast because I have surgery. No. You have to, what if the surgery is canceled? What if you get strong? What if your body changes? So that person is only allowed to break his fast the moment his client is at risk. Okay? And it has to be physical harm. Physical harm. You can't say, I'm a trial lawyer, I'm not sharp today. No, because the Sharia, the law doesn't accept fuzzy stuff. It wants black and white. You cannot even have any law, every law, US law, any nation, any kind of law. Fuzziness is the enemy of law. We can't make a law on this. So if there can be material or financial harm, in this case material harm, physical harm, then you have to break your fast. But the compensation now is qada plus fidya in this category, which we'll cover in a second. Because you broke your fast for the sake of somebody else. So you owe the makeup day and you feed a poor Muslim. All right, what's the next one? Imsak. Remember the lesson on imsak. There's 2 types of imsak. 2 times that you may have to do imsak. One we all have to do, which we said is the Prophet said, or the Prophet was described, he would stop eating suhoor, the amount it takes to recite 60 verses of Quran, we're going to estimate that at 10 minutes. And the second imsak is when you had an excuse to break the fast. You had a valid excuse. But in the middle of the day, the excuse is gone. Such as the traveler returns home. The surgeon is finished with his surgery. The sick person is no longer sick. The menstruating woman is no longer menstruating. So out of respect for the day, they must observe imsak. This imsak is fard. It's an obligation. out of respect for the month and to avoid suspicion. Imagine now, we don't know you're traveling. You traveled, you arrived back to Newark Airport, you went to ShopRite to pick something up. I bumped into you, you're still chewing gum from the plane. Now, what do you think? You know, I'm supposed to give you excuses, right? But the Sharia, in this case, where it comes to your reputation, you assume you behave according to the worst case scenario. The ignorant person will say, this guy doesn't fast. He's chewing gum in the middle of Ramadan. He's a man. He's not on height. He's not pregnant. He's not sick. He's not traveling. He has no excuse. Now, the Ramadan, we know. Now, he might have diabetes, right? What about a guy can have diabetes. He shouldn't eat in front of people. He should do imsak in front of people. The diabetic, he never fasts, ever, if he has certain kinds of diabetes. So his imsak is in front of people. Why? For his own reputation, and to respect the month and to respect the other people fasting. The obligation, there is a financial obligation related to the month of Ramadan as well, and that is Zakatul Fitr. 5 pounds of staple food to whom? Any Muslim that does not have financial security for a year. So for example, you have a full-time job, so you have financial security for a year. A person who does gig work, or it's not a real job, it's like just a labor thing that he could be fired at any minute. But of course, you can use a wakil. A wakil is an agent, which is always the masjid. Okay? Now this is obligatory upon the head of household to pay for everyone in his household before Salat al-Eid. But because it takes us a lot of time to go out to Costco, to go to BJ's, to get the food, to drive it to the people's homes. Okay? So we're going to ask you all to pay your Zakatul Fitr well before that. Even 10 days before. That gives us time to collect the Zakatul Fitr, to buy the food and to distribute it. And the Zakatul Fitr, we go by $15 per person, payable by the head of the household for everyone who is his dependent in the household. So if your niece lives with you, you got to pay for her. If your mother lives with you, pay for your mom. Okay? If your sister lives with you, pay for your sister. If it's a woman who's the head of household and she's got 3 kids, if her dad is alive, he pays for her. But if her dad is dead, she pays for her kids. Okay. Now lastly, we get to the expiations and punishments, and they are 4. There are 4 expiations and punishments. What are these expiations and punishments? Qada, fidya, qada plus fidya, qada plus kafara. Qada, very simply, 1 day makeup for another day. But qada has certain rules. Number 1, it's an obligation. So therefore, you can only break it with the same excuses as if it was Ramadan. But because you're outside of Ramadan, if you were to sinfully break the fast, then you would not earn another kafara. You would just have to make istighfar, repent, and make up the day again. Okay, that's qada. If you were to delay the qada a whole year, and another Ramadan came and you owed qada, then you have to do qada plus fidya. So first let's talk about what is fidya. Fidya, it's 2 handfuls of food for a poor Muslim. Right? And it is due upon the person who can never fast. The person who's sick permanently, he has to pay fidya. Old people who are sick permanently, or a diabetic. All right, does a pregnant woman pay fidya? No, she doesn't, because pregnancy is a temporary sickness. It's not a sickness, but it's an excuse. It's a temporary excuse. Okay? Breastfeeding. No, it's qada, not fidya. So that's fidya. And the third expiation is qada plus fidya. And qada plus fidya is due upon somebody who delays their qada for over a year, and the next Ramadan has come. Qada plus fidya is due upon somebody who had to break their fast for the sake of somebody else. So the breastfeeding woman who had to break her fast for the sake of her kids, she owes qada plus fidya. Or the bus driver who was about to get dizzy and crash the bus, he owes qada plus fidya. Lastly, qada plus kafara. Somebody who intentionally, not through misunderstanding, not through forgetfulness, broke his fast. So we remove from this, of course, valid excuses. We also remove from this reasonable misunderstandings. We remove them from that. So this person has committed a grave sin. Grave. He has to make up the day, and then he has to feed poor 60 different poor Muslims per day. 1 handful, 2 handfuls of food. So he has to identify 60 poor Muslims, or he uses a wakil. So how much is a handful of food? Like, what is an average lunch that you were to get? $10? You can get a lunch for $10. A drink, a sandwich, some fries. 10 times 60 is $600. What if I can't afford $600? You apply for zakah. You ask for sadaqah. You get a loan. You sell something. What if I can't even do any of that? Then you fast 60 days in a row. Well, brother, I couldn't even fast the one poor day of Ramadan. How am I going to fast 60 days in a row? But I have no money. Then no community give me sadaqah. No one can give me zakah. We say, if your status is that bad, you're that bad at fasting, and you're that poor, and your social life is that bad that you can't even get zakah or sadaqah, and you don't have anything to sell, well, Allah forgive you already. That's your situation. That happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Old man came, Messenger of Allah, I broke my fast. Why? I married this beautiful young woman, I couldn't resist. Broke my fast. He said, fast 60 days. He said, Messenger of Allah, look at me, I'm skinny. I can't fast 60 days. I couldn't even fast the one day. I'm too sick to fast. He said, all right, go give out food for 60 poor Muslims. He said, Messenger of Allah, in my tribe, I'm the poorest one. He said, okay, we'll give you the food. He said, I didn't have money to buy food for people. He said, we'll give you the food and go distribute it to the hungry. He said, Messenger of Allah, no one's hungrier than me. He said, take the food, may Allah forgive you, and eat it yourself. He said, mercy of the Messenger. All right, question and answer time. Open QA. Khalas, you just want to go eat? Yeah.
So I've been on the plane where the sun is setting, but since we're at a high altitude, it takes a while for it to come down.
Yes, you have to be absolutely certain that the sun has set. See, we're looking for certainty, and that's why the untrained eye cannot produce certainty, and the phone calculations do not produce certainty. So for Maghrib, you also have to give it a buffer zone. For Fajr, you have to give it a buffer zone. Next. Yeah. Say again. If you're in the masjid and they call the adhan and they're reliable people, then you can follow it. But if they're sloppy, they're not reliable, you don't trust them, you have to wait. You have to wait. But you can't announce that the muadhin is wrong because you're causing fitna like that. Let's see if there's any questions from YouTube. Anyone else with a question? Medication that it has to be taken Ramadan, no, it's not allowed, and they have the excuse to break their fasts. But it has to be prescribed by a Muslim doctor who fasts. A practicing Muslim doctor, he says, you have to take this medication, then they're excused. They can inject it if it's not energy producing, then they can inject it, not a problem. Yeah. If it's not an energizing medicine, they can take it. Yeah. No, but you're not taking it after Fajr. You can take anything you want before Fajr. Because food is also slow release energy too. If you think about meat, it's slow release. So yeah, you can take anything you want before Fajr. You just can't take it after Fajr. If anyone has caffeine problems, you can get Genius caffeine pills, which is a slow release, so you don't get headaches. You can perk up for work. It's called Genius caffeine pills. Yes? Yeah. You continue it. You continue it. Yeah.
And if you are reciting Quran in Tawheed, like if you're reciting it yourself, does it count towards the completion of the
If you're reciting it yourself?
If you're reciting it in and out.
Yeah. It doesn't matter whether you recite in the obligatory prayer, the sunnah prayer, or outside of. It's all one khatm. Yeah. Alright, jazakumullahu khairan everybody. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wal asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihat. Wa tawasaw bil haqq. Wa tawasaw bis sabr. Wassalamu alaykum. Alaikum. How's it going?